All right, we are here in the remote studio with Nathan. I think you're calling in from Boulder,
That's correct.
and
Yep.
Antonio from Italy. So it's a
That's right.
very global podcast. Co-founders of Zed, welcome.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think that Zed is relatively famous, at least Hacker News famous, and so I've heard it a bunch. People who follow the podcast have definitely heard of it because the MCP folks love you guys, and the first public demo of MCP was kind of slotted in. I also know that you guys have done some interesting work with code editing and all that good stuff. But for those who are the uninitiated, what is it?
So Zed is our attempt at building the world's greatest code editor. And for me, what that meant after working on this problem for probably 15 years was performance needed to be absolutely amazing. We created the Atom editor previously. And as part of Atom, the shell around Atom, Electron, was spun out into its own thing. And Electron is what VS Code is built on and a bunch of other apps. And basically, the premise of Electron is you're going to build your desktop application as if it's a web page and then kind of dress it up in its own application shell or whatever to look like a desktop app. But it's essentially a web app. And we were really frustrated with kind of the ceiling that using web technology put on how excellent of a user experience we could deliver. And that had to do with sort of raw text rendering quality and performance. Zed runs at 120 frames a second, reliably delivering frames. And so there's just like a fundamentally more fluid experience using it that we just couldn't achieve in web tech. So we basically, rather than building Zed like a web page, we built it more like a video game. We went down and ran code on the graphics hardware directly and engineered from there for the system to be incredibly performant. It's our opportunity to advance the state of the art on editing generally. So a bunch of investment, not only in how fast things move, but also really sophisticated indexed primitives for text that allows to do things like nonlinear undo, tracking the causal history of change over time with CRDTs, real-time collaborative editing. And we've essentially engineered an entire editor from an empty repo to up to about over 500,000 lines of Rust, engineered the entire IDE from scratch with the theory that if we control it all, we'll be able to deliver the most exceptional experience.
What's the rough history when did you start it, and what are the main eras? I've obviously now you're in the sort of the AI era, but have there been phases in the company history or the project history that are distinct enough that you can call it for these years we focused on this thing and the other thing?
Yeah, I could take this one. Yeah, I think initially, I think we started with this premise of not only we want to build a great code editor that, is performant and, it's written in Rust, but also that is collaborative. I mean, one of the first things we implemented into the product, one of the reasons why our buffer is powered by a CRDT is because we wanted to make it collaborative from the ground up. And so, yeah, one of the first features we shipped was literally being able to collaborate and pair on Zed. Any pairing session in Zed happens within Zed. We don't use any external tool. We hop on a channel and we sort of work together on Nathan's project, right? I can join Nathan's project and we can collaborate on his machine. So that was I don't know. So I guess if I had to sort of recall the eras is we first started on the editor, getting any text on screen at all. So being able to edit anything at all, and then being able to collaborate on that text together. So, seeing each other's cursors and whatnot. And, after that AI, now it turns out that the fact that we're collaborative helps a lot also with AI. The fact that we're performant also helps a lot with AI. I'd love to talk. Okay,
Yeah.
Nathan.
Well, the fact that we've made the investments necessary to have enough control to deliver excellent performance and collaboration will also give us the control I think it takes to build sort of the first editor that's truly engineered from the ground up for the AI era, because our team understands every line of this code. We've been here the whole time. We're not building on some other existing product that has existed for a long period of time. All of the clay is wet and ready to be sculpted for what's happening now.
Yeah, excellent. Awesome. There's so much I could go into that. Just as a side note, because I just every time I run into someone from the Electron background, I have to ask, have you looked at Tori? Is that like an interesting direction or is it doomed?
I haven't looked at it that much. Like, got to a point where I was like, I'm done with anything related to web tech whatsoever. At least for building this desktop editor. Now, we're going to actually ship it to a browser tab. I'm hoping later this year. We'll see. But with my approach, it was like I wanted to go with the raw Mac OS at first APIs. Give me a metal graphics context and let me render it so that if it's ever dropping a frame, there's nobody's fault that it is but mine. I want enough control to make sure that we don't drop frames. Why? But again, that's an extreme perspective. We've invested pretty heavily to make that possible. So I could see other points in the trade-off space making sense for different apps. But for an editor, I think this is what it takes to build the editor I want to use. Put it that way.
Sometimes I do feel like I'm a worse programmer because I'm not phased by the state of VS Code. But then like a lot of programmers I admire, like Richard, who helped make this call happen, and like the MCP folks, like they really care about their editor. And like, yeah, I totally buy that good programmers should care about their editors. It's just that like for some reason it just hasn't been a pain point for me. So I didn't switch, because it's nothing broken.
Yeah, and I think that's reasonable. I'm excited though about, again, it's a lot of work. There's a ton of surface area on building an IDE that anybody would want to use at all. We're just now, we're not even 1.0, but what I'm excited to have is like when we hit 1.0, now we have this great foundation on which to push the envelope and solve those deeper pain points. I think we could have taken a shortcut and kind of built on top of the status quo. But for me personally, what I wanted to do was actually push the envelope, transcend the status quo. And to do that, we had to go back to the beginning, which takes longer, but we're almost there.
Yeah, you paid it's almost like tech debt, but it's not even debt. It's just the table stakes. So one really nice way to track your AI era, I guess, is just your blog. You introduced Zed AI almost a year ago now, and then you started doing a whole bunch of stuff. I know. I think the first thing that kind of hit my radar as far as like general consciousness of like, well, here's a new thing that like other people are like really should be paying attention to is Zeta. We kind of briefly recap Zeta and then we'll go into Zed agents.
Totally, yeah. Zeta is like model that we fine-tuned to produce what we call this feature like called edit prediction Zed. So this idea that like, for the longest time, there's been like Copilot style suggestions where like Copilot suggests edits at your cursor. With Zeta, you have edit predictions that span like all around your cursor. So you can have non-local edits. You can have an insertion at your cursor, but you can also like jump to edit, as you can see here in the demo. So like it predicts edits like at locations that are far away from your cursor. So yeah, that's kind of the how the feature is presented in Zed. And yeah, the way we implement it, which the blog post goes in the details about, is by fine-tuning our own model. So yeah, we started with the Qwen 2.5 coder MB and went through the whole process, collecting examples, fine-tuning, doing supervised fine-tuning, doing direct preference optimization. And so yeah, this is kind of the feature that we shipped. I think at this point, it's like, a few months ago, yeah.
Like the rest of Zed, fully open source. The data that it's trained on is actually open. We're collecting data from if you're editing an open source project in Zed, you can opt in to collect the data. And then that's all sitting in a data warehouse right now. We're going to work to process it and incorporate more of that feedback into the edit prediction as well to build an open ecosystem around this. But this was kind of, I think, our warm-up act. I mean, Zed AI originally was just like, can you strap your text editor to an LLM? And there are people that like that experience of, we're literally giving you kind of like the open API SDK web page, but like in a hardcore code editor where you can like, how in the SDKs, playgrounds or whatever, you can like edit the message structure or whatever. We basically took that raw playground experience and built that into the code editor in a very like key binding friendly, Vim binding friendly, really great editing experience. Then we built edit prediction.
Also inline transformation, right? Like this is what we're seeing here.
Right. That's true. As part of this first phase, just the ability to like generate code in a particular location, pretty basic feature. Then edit prediction being kind of the next more like bringing AI on board as a first class concept rather than building like great dev tools for AI, like ZAI had been before. And then now we're going to be transitioning to actually getting full-blown agents working inside of Zed.
Yeah, I think that's, the bulk of what we're here to discuss. I think we're going to launch this on May 7th when you go live. If you push it back, we'll just pretend that that's the actual date. But everything's open source, which is really nice. I was like, we can actually talk about anything interesting. But I guess at a high level, how do you approach this work? I think a lot of people like Windsurf, Cursor, they all have this sort of agent mode. And in there, I think there's maybe a playbook that you can kind of study. There's also a recent post from Thorsten Ball, I think, that went fairly viral, claiming there's no moat. I think that, yeah, what's your take on all this? Like, how do you start building a code agent? And what's your different take on it?
I mean, I don't know that there is no moat. Like, I read
That's what he said.
There's a little more to it than just, calling an LLM in a loop. But what I would say is ultimately, I think if you can integrate an LLM, prompt it the correct way, give it the appropriate tools, it's definitely come a long way in the last year. Like when we were looking at the experience some of like Cursor was building, for example, in the first year, like it seemed like a lot of the problem being solved was about integrating the LLM into the application. So there was a lot of like integration work to bridge that gap. But now the LLMs, because they've taken on this tool calling and are getting better at tool calling, the integration story has definitely gotten a lot easier, I think. So in that sense, like the moat is shrinking rapidly. I mean, to me, Zed's moat is like implementing really nice product experiences with technical excellence and they're performant, like just delivering a really great user experience that in order to compete with, you would have to essentially build your own editor from scratch. So that's the moat we're relying on. In terms of integrating LLMs into it, I think of an LLM as almost like another collaborator that we want to facilitate in Zed. We let you edit with your teammates in Zed. We want to let you collaborate with LLMs in Zed. It's great that they're sort of plugging in to, like, they're developing the infrastructure to sort of plug into the existing app and use it just like another entity. I'm liking that a lot.
But yeah, it is true that like, since like a while ago, I think when tool calling first appeared, it was just like you have tool calling and the model would just call one tool and that's what all it would do, right? And now that you've trained it so that like just Claude 3.5 Sonnet has no problem just going loop over and over, call this tool and then come back, call this other tool. Like that is a thing that like I think and like Torsten's putting it, I think it makes sense. It's like, it sort of makes implementing this agentic loop a lot easier because like a lot of the heavy lifting of this loop is on the model, which does a really good job at it.
We're going to be taking increasing responsibility over is that calling tools in a loop actually delivering results for users? Like that's the magic, right? Like, of course you can put together a demo that has an LLM call tools in a loop. How do we make sure that actually drives toward an outcome? And that's about the lingo these days is an eval. I mean, where I come from, the only software that's ever been good is software that's under test. If that software is not being tested before a user touches it, it probably doesn't work very well. So I think evals are just part of that in a way of just like, but it's a new world, right? Like one of the cool things about the way we've done testing and thus far in Zed is everything is fully deterministic. We even simulate like network interaction and we literally simulate the scheduler such that we can interleave deterministically network messages. Everything's deterministically tested and fuzz tested. We randomly bombard a data structure with, hostile interactions to make sure that it doesn't panic. For the first time with an LLM, we can't do that anymore. It's deterministic. And so you move the testing paradigm from like pass fail to like, I get a numeric grade. And yet everything old is new again. I mean, like it's still testing in a way. So that's really what, we've gotten like step one is like build a beautiful user interface that we can plug the agent into. And I think we've accomplished that, or, there's always work to do, but it's a gorgeous way to sort of surface the agent's intelligence. Step two, let people use that, collect data, collect traces. And then step three, which we're in the middle of right now, and will hopefully be done in time for launch, is like optimize the entire system around delivering outcomes there.
Okay, very logical sort of step-by-step reasoning. I guess like for users, like what should they expect that they should start trying this out on? I think like what's interesting with the CRDT first collaboration that you guys have done is that you can kind of do asynchronous streaming of edits. Basically, this can get very spendy very quickly because you could just have like a coding agent run all the time, and it doesn't even really need prompts as long as you understand what the goal of the project is. It could just kind of be in there coding for you, whether you're there or not. How far did you go with this?
I think right now we've just scratched the surface of the potential, I think, for using CRDTs. So they're already really great for helping us manage change and deal with nonlinear undo. But like, I mean, Antonio, you can talk about the multi-buffer.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that is a good example where like, the agent can sort of make changes and you can be editing your buffer at the same time, like no problem. So like we deal with conflict there. But the cool thing is that like, as soon as you have like a bunch of changes coming from the agent, you can open up this thing we call a multi-buffer, which is basically this like tab that opens in your center pane. So yeah, this is the Agentic Loop. This is one of the toy projects I use all the time. It's FontKit.
This is the new agent panel, by the way, moving away from the sort of optimized, text-oriented, more SDK approach that we had started with. It's still there in the product, and more towards something optimized for reading and optimized for letting the agent kind of loop and call tools, and it should look pretty familiar. And that was kind of the point. People were a little intimidated by, the original tool was more of a developer tool for someone working with an LLM, because that's what we needed to like play with the tech, basically. This is more let the tool do stuff. But yeah, so it's gathering up context.
And now it's like starting to, it's pretty cool. Like we've seen this pattern in Cloud 3.7, which is kind of different from the other models where like it really loves to gather up context first and then it starts doing edits. So anyway, check this out. We created this one file, so source variations. What I can do is like hop on this multi-buffer. Right now, it's the only thing that it changed is it created this new file called variations.rs. And so it's going to make more sense as soon as we have more files in this. So it's making the changes right now to librs. Let's see.
We're going to need to have like a few moments later.
Okay. Well, I mean, are you tempted as a toolmaker to do like fan out calls and parallel calls? This seems pretty linear.
Yeah, I mean, right now, it is pretty linear. Yeah, what do you mean by a fan out? Like multiple agents sort of like doing...
Like, okay, I got to update 5 files. As long as I have a plan in place for what the shared dependencies are, I can just spin up sub-agent.
Totally. Yeah. I think, that's something we have like talked about. Even like, right now we're making as you can see in the code, like all the editing happens like via a tool call. So like Cloud 3.7 has like I think, what do we call the tool now? Edit file, where like it produces like an old string and a new string, and we sort of like replace that old string with that new string. But yeah, one thing we were thinking about is like, we can do it like Aider style, or like we have an editor model. And so to your point, what we could do is like have, an architect model that sort of starts, comes up with a plan and then decides, okay, these are like the 5 files that I want to touch. Let me sort of, do that in parallel. So something we've thought about. We haven't done it yet because we want to,
I mean, what are your thoughts on imposing additional, like one cool thing about just letting the LLM loop is that it, like as soon as you're imposing additional structure beyond that, are you kind of leaving some of the intelligence of the model behind? Like you're kind of having to kind of supersede on its behalf and say, okay, cool, now the plan's done. We're going to go fan out. Do we know that it can fan out and that that's going to work? I mean, that's,
Yeah, I mean, look, very fair question, and something that only a test will elucidate for you. My sense is that correctness is and maximum capability is only one dimension that you care about. You also care about speed. You really do. And
totally.
I don't have to tell you guys that.
Yeah.
And so enabling people to, while the thing is coding, to inspect files, and like we can read much faster than the LLM can generate. So if we can read the 5 different files and start giving feedback on like where it's going off track, that would probably be better than full autonomous, where maybe a more linear, a more general intelligence approach would make sense.
Makes sense. Further down, like the editing. So like I'll collapse the panel for a second. Still editing in the meantime, but yeah, like you can see here, I have basically like a list of files, right? Like a list of excerpts that have been touched by the model. And so what I can do is like sort of come in here and sort of say, make changes to this. And, I can change stuff that the model did, this is what the model did, but also I can come in here and sort of decide, I want to change something else, right? And like make edits to this. Now, I don't know. This is an example.
I think takes nuance, right?
Exactly. Like, distinguishing between what the model did and what we did so that we don't show like changes that the user did as, hunks to review, if that makes sense. I think that's a really, really cool thing that you can do with our tech. And, but yeah, also just, the beauty of this is an editor. I can just have a cursor in here and just scroll up and down in this list of excerpts that spans across files and make the changes I want, or simply decide, okay, yeah, I like this. I can sort of accept, or reject. And these are like buffers that you can sort of like, like you can see here, I have a language server running in here. Look, it's highlighting the return value and the function, and like it's sort of like, yeah, it's as any other buffer, like, but it's a multi-buffer. So yeah, I can access multiple files at the same time, and like I said,
instead of fragments from across your code base. And so the cool thing is, as you're sort of interacting with the agent and looping, right now when we're keeping or rejecting, we actually are dismissing, but before launch, we want to experiment with the idea of keeping the actual multi-buffer around and putting it in some sort of like discarded state. The idea being that when you're interacting with the agent, you're sort of building up this like excerpt of the code base, like a kind of a relevant working set that you're operating on. And that could potentially be useful even if you wanted to switch to guns and go in and do manual code editing. Now you have this kind of curated subset of the code base, like pulled together in one continuous multi-buffer. So I'm excited about the potential of that. It's kind of this like agentically derived code base excerpt that you can actively work on.
What I like about that narrative is also just like, I don't know, in a world where like a lot more code is going to be generated by agents, I still like the idea of understanding what the agent did, like being in control. I still like this idea of like, owning the code base, right? Like, and knowing exactly what happened. And so a reviewing experience where like, it's crystal clear what the agent did, what you did, and like just being able to review all those excerpts to me is like a key part of making, an agentic experience really productive and useful.
Okay, so a couple other, I think, bookkeeping or sort of table stakes type of things that I always ask around these things. Any interesting insights on code indexing? How do you do code search?
Now we're launching with just letting the model search for code.
Normal grep.
Yeah, exactly. Just because we've seen it to work reasonably well. We have code indexing like sort of in flight right now, but I think we're probably going to launch without it just because we're seeing value being delivered already without it.
Awesome. And then the other thing that was not standard, but now is becoming standard is the ability to execute commands in a terminal, which it sounds like you guys have. Anything tricky or special around there?
Not really. I think the one thing we're doing right now, and we're still like in the process of evaluating, is like, I think we started by letting the model sort of just running bash. And then sort of we were like, oh, maybe it would be better for the model to sort of use whatever shell the user has configured. So we're experimenting with that right now. Just because, you know, in your shell, you might have like already pre-configured environments and like things that are useful for the model to sort of run tests or whatnot. But yeah, we're in the process of like experimenting with it.
Yeah, I would say it's a current pain point for me with Cursor and Windsurf that they basically run in a different shell than the one I already have open. So it has to do things like do linking of projects with Supabase or whatever. And then I have to do this dance where I like click on the link to get the off token and you know, authorize the CLI and all that. The environment variables is always a tricky thing.
We're definitely looking at we're loading your environment, and we're also loading and evaluating the appropriate like RC file for your shell.
Yeah.
So that things are properly configured.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like the scariest part it was it started to try to problem solve some dependency issue I had. Then it started like brew installing some random package I've never heard of.
RMRF user.
Not RMRF. I mean, that's the easy one that you know, you can train to not do. But
totally.
Yeah, I think this permissioning needs to be taken care of. Cool. And then I think something that is always a tricky point is pricing. I don't see a pricing page on Zed. This thing is costly. How are you thinking about this?
So we are going to be charging for using the agentic mode if you want to use Zed as a provider of your request, basically. And that's really about convenience more than anything. Like, we don't expect to make the most amazing margins on charging subscriptions for AI compute at this point. Like, it's pretty cost intensive. But if you can kind of open Zed, sign in with your GitHub, click one link, put your credit card in, we charge you $20 a month. And then we'll have for 500 requests. And then beyond that, we'll, you know, charge you a small like usage base per request fee that would be reasonable. That's like the happy path. You want to bring your own API keys? You can do that too. And so that's kind of overall going to be our philosophy. Like, we're an open source product. So if we don't offer you options, like you can get the code and build them yourself. So we really want people to have freedom with kind of how they interact. If you want to interact with Olama or you want to bring your own API keys, but now we all are going to be launching for the first time a paid service around this.
The previous code prediction stuff wasn't paid?
No, it was all free. Yeah. Not, you know, never with the intention of it being free forever, but we wanted to get an agentic offering out the door before we started charging. And so now that's the moment. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else we should cover on Zed Agents?
Good question. Yeah. I mean, the thing I'll say is like,
I think MCP is a good, you know, a key component in that. Like, we want to make it very easy to like install MCP servers and like, and I think the thought right now is to have like two ways you can install them. One is, you know, the sort of basic one that we currently have. I think we have the other one as well, but yeah, like sort of service these two ways. Like, one is you can sort of change your configuration setting, point to an MCP binary, and, you know, Zed just runs that binary. That's one path. The other path that I'm also really excited about is like going through our extension store. So, you know, like if you've installed like an MCP server before, you know, I'm always like, okay, like I have the binary, but how do I run it? Like, does it need anything? And so streamlining like that experience where like, you know, if you need the GitHub API key, right, to list all the GitHub repos, right? If you want to install the GitHub MCP server, I'm really excited about making that experience really, really straightforward. You go in the extension store, you'll install the GitHub MCP server, and, you know, we'll sort of surface an easy way for you to configure the MCP server so that you can interact with the agent.
It's up there in the top. You can click that and filter
it. Or third from the left. There you go.
Context servers? Oh, these are all MCP. Oh, okay.
Yeah. We should probably just say MCP.
The idea here is like, these are just little instructions for Zed that tell Zed, here's how you download this thing and configure it, basically. And when you install this, you'll have the MCP server working, just streamlining the experience of using these things and hooking them up to an agent.
Okay, I mean, stupid question, but like, why must there be a separate repo for each of these?
No, they lit all that's on that. Go visit the repository and you'll see what I'm saying.
Here?
Yeah, click on the visit repository thing.
I was clicking on it, but you couldn't see it.
Okay.
This isn't like we're hosting a fork or something of the MCP server. What's that extension is it's just instructions how to get the server installed. Like it just streamlines the installation of it.
It's like a language server. Like we have an extension for a language server, but we don't we don't own the language server. It's just like a recipe. Like all the extension is a recipe for like installing it and configuring it. So making it easy to sort of integrate it in the Zed.
Okay. I don't know if that scales. There's going to be, thousands of these. I don't know if
Yeah, this is why we're offering the other path. Like you can still hop into your settings file and just like drop a path to a binary and it works.
But if you're an MCP author and, you want to make it easy for Zed users to install your MCP server into Zed, you could go define a little extension. It's pretty low effort to do.
50 lines or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Excellent. Cool. Well, I think that is a good intro to Zed's AI work. I think obviously you're not going to stop there. Maybe a kind of a curious question to end it off. Where is us all going in like 5-10 years for Zed? Like what's the game plan?
Well, AI is going to become an ever growing part, I think, of software development generally, and it'll definitely be part of Zed. Like we're here to build the future of software development, and so AI is a huge component. I mean, long term, it's really about multi-agent workflows. I think it's really about taking the CRDT work that we've, like I said, we just scratched the surface and broadening that. Like okay, you're working with multiple agents in parallel. Maybe you've got 5 separate threads running, doing different things. How are you multiplexing those changes together? Like in a world where human beings are the bottleneck, a tool designed for mailing patches to the kernel mailing list is probably fine. It's not a big deal that I'm like posting on a web form on a pull request and like dealing with merge conflicts and all these things. But when I'm really like working with agents in parallel, I think having deeper integration into the tool that I'm operating with around the idea that we're going to be merging changes. I have this vision of like being able to kind of mute and unmute changes from individual threads in my current working copy simultaneously. So I just have a much more fluid relationship with these collaborators that I'm bringing into the world now, this agentic collaborator. And so like a big part of the reason for Zed's existence was doing the vertical engineering necessary to allow human beings to collaborate in a new way. We wanted to collaborate not commit by commit, but keystroke by keystroke. And that's kind of a weird thing for human beings to want to do, it seems like, in this world. Like our team works that way. We work a lot together in real time, but a lot of people, they don't want to do that, but they do want to do it now when they're interacting with an agent. And so I think an agent is like this fundamentally new kind of collaborator that is always there to respond. Like the minute you give them the comment on the pull request, like they're already off to the races doing the next thing. And so I think our vision of like bringing all that collaborative tooling into the authoring environment and making it fine-grained and making it fast and responsive is really compatible with this world where we have these new kinds of collaborators. So for me, like that's the long-term vision. I think this is really just step one. Let's get an agent into the editor and able to interact with it. And we're going to keep iterating on giving it deeper and deeper access into the system, giving it access to the debugger, getting it access to all our interaction we have around Git. Like we have this huge system that we control. I want to wire AI into all of it, but this is where we're starting. It didn't make sense to not launch it. We have it. It's valuable. It's going to keep getting more valuable. But yeah, I forgot where I was going with that.
Agents as collaborators, I think.
Agents as collaborators, yeah. I mean, I think that's and again, vertically integrating and lacing agentic capabilities deeply into the system because we're able to do that.
Antonio, I'll let you have the last word. My brief reflection on that is I think there's a protocol in here somewhere because why should I be constrained to your agents? You're going to have great agents, right? But so there'll be like 5 others. You mentioned Aider as well. A lot of people like that. So I think there's like a potential for another protocol here somewhere.
Totally.
That probably Zed already has internally, which is the CRDT based collaboration thing. If you just make that a little bit easier to work with by people who are not you, maybe that's how it does.
100%. I think like for us, it starts with having like a vertically integrated product because that's where we can, make the experience shine. But I don't think it should be limited to Zed. I don't think we have any, constraint around that. I think like as soon as we have like something that we think is beautiful and like works great on Zed, I think, we should expand it to other. Yeah, for sure.
You need some like fancy name, like coding agent protocol or something.
Yeah,
I'll make sure we go ahead.
You're supposed to have the last word, but something that would make me happy is that instead of one more fork of VS Code, people just had a great API for surfacing a great agentic experience into a tool that was welcoming to that. We don't need to be sharp-elbowed about controlling all of that.
Yep, I support that. Antonio, any other thoughts?
Word.
Word. All right, that is the last word from Antonio. Thank you guys for joining. Yeah, no, you can chat, but no, this is great. You're doing awesome work, and you're extremely passionate about it, which I think is like the key thing that people can tell from just talking to you guys. So I'm excited for the launch. I'm definitely going to try it out, and good luck with all the awesome work that you're doing with coding agents.
Thank you so much.
Have a good one. Appreciate the opportunity.